Awesome. Here we are. Thanks everybody for joining. Happy Wednesday. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Today, we're here to talk about how to convert a VMware vSphere environment into a VMware Cloud Foundation. We've brought some of our favorite speakers back to join us today. And then coming up on March 26th, we're going to be doing Mythbusters, private clouds and their public value, talking about some of the strengths and misconceptions around doing that process. Also, general reminder, believe it or not, we are back at Explorer season already. And we're going to be back in Las Vegas this year. We're only doing Las Vegas in the traditional Explorer format from August 25th to 28th. The call for papers is open if anyone would like to submit to present this year. So you can do that directly from the Explorer webpage. And then we're going to be doing smaller regional events in several locations over the course of the year rather than doing our traditional show in Barcelona. So there may be an Explorer coming to you. With that, that's all I've got for the intro. Jonathan, how are you? Good to have you back.
I'm good. Thanks for the warm intro there for VMworld, or sorry, Explore, I should say.
Yes, you've been here a while, haven't you?
I've been here for quite a while.
Outstanding.
So let me bring up our deck here. All right, so welcome to our webinar. So today we're going to be talking about how to quickly convert a VMware vSphere instance into VMware Cloud Foundation, and sort of a follow-on to our previous webinar where we had talked about the import process, but we'll get into that a little bit more. So just a little bit about me and and Cecilio here. So my name, Jonathan McDonald. I am a master architect on our portfolio services engineering team here at Broadcom, and I've been around for approximately 20 years, give and take. I was in support for a bit, and I've moved on to the engineering side for professional services, and so we focus very much on making sure that our professional services teams are prepared to to be able to deliver architectures and whatnot for our customers. So I'll pass to Cecilio. You can introduce yourself, and then we'll continue on.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan, and happy to be here. My name is Cecilio Alvarado. I lead the VCF Portfolio Services engineering team. I've been with VMware VMware at Broadcom going on almost 11 years now, but been in the VMware business for about 20 years prior to that with Citi when I was on the corporate side. Excited about this session Jonathan is about to present, even for myself to listen in. He's a smart guy, part of my team. I just make sure they get it done, and he has a great session here for you.
Awesome, thanks, Cecilio. So yeah, let's get started. So our agenda today, we're going to start off by going through a bit of an overview. And so if you were on our last webinar where we talked about the import process, this is something where it's going to be some very similar information. However, after that, you were going right straight into the conversion process. So that is somewhere first talk a little bit about the differences, and then we're going to jump right into it. We're going to jump into how do you pre-check your environment and make sure you're ready to go for it. Preparing the environment, deploying the SDDC Manager that you're going to need for the conversion process, and then we're going to convert a vCenter instance that was all in my lab. So all these are my videos. Cut out some of the wait times because it can take several hours in some cases to do some of the pieces based on what's being deployed. And then after that, we're going to go right into our Q&A section. So if you have any questions during the session, post them to the Q&A panel, and Cecilio is going to be monitoring that, and we will do the present or the answering of the questions as it goes once we're done that sort of piece. So that is our agenda today. I don't want to bore with slides, so there is a ton of demos, a ton of videos that I've recorded for that. So hopefully that will help to show not only theoretical, but exactly the process and and how it runs. All right, so let's jump into our overview section. And so VMware Cloud Foundation, is the private cloud engine of VMware by Broadcom, and so I always like to level set by presenting this slide. And so I want to basically make sure that people understand exactly what Cloud Foundation is, how it simplifies the configuration, but then also how it links to our core business initiatives. And so the core business initiatives that we have are modern infrastructure, unified cloud experience, and the secure and resilient platform. And so those are things that as we work through the professional services angle, we have to make sure that we're able to have stuff that delivers each of these these pieces, but also fits into the idea of what Cloud Foundation is. And so that really, like I said, is a private cloud. And so it's an automation and orchestration engine that allows you to very quickly deploy compute, storage, and networking components from VMware. Now, as we start to get more into this presentation, I'll start to talk about workload domains. And so, the private cloud building block that SDDC Manager and VMware Cloud Foundation uses is a workload domain. And so the workload domain, is a construct where, it's the piece that, that houses the compute storage network, and it also has all the operational functions such as deploy, scale, lifecycle manage of the different pieces of the environment. And so the workload domain has dedicated resources for for each of these components, and each of the components obviously is automatically deployed as a part of that deployment process. So it's a very powerful contract that that saves a lot of time and allows for VMware by Broadcom to basically provide a much more standardized architecture and design for the components underlying the Cloud Foundation infrastructure. And so this is something that with the years and years of experience that both our consultants and our engineering team have, it allows us to to provide a much more, like I said, standardized design for some of these pieces. So when we look at what and how SDDC Manager and VMware Cloud Foundation works, is that we have the construct of a workload domain. And so that workload domain in this case is the management workload domain. So this is the first thing that gets deployed. And then from there, you can see we have each of the components that are housed there for the management. And if we want to expand our domain, we have a workflow essentially that goes through and allows you to go and add a workload domain with each of the respective components for that particular workload domain based on whatever the parameters that we have for that workload domain. So the workload domain's purpose is to run the actual applications, right? And so the actual applications, we want to make sure they're segregated from the management, as a best practice design for each of the different pieces. And so you can see in the middle the automated workflow that we have. And so this automated workflow essentially allows us to specify different configurations for everything from virtual center, to the way that we SSO that domain, to a choice of images or baselines for your updates, as well as whether you're using the existing network fabric or the type of storage that we're doing. And so all of these pieces you specify during that initial deployment workflow, and as a result, it speeds up the deployment time once you have each of the pieces that are there. And so this is the great function that we have with with SDDC Manager, is that as long as you have your hosts available and you have a few basic prerequisites set, we can go in and very quickly deploy each of these pieces. And so from my experiences in my lab, it takes somewhere between 2 and 4 hours for the management domain, and then depending on the number of hosts for a workload domain, it'll take a similar amount of time for a similar amount of hosts. Now, outside of just sort of provisioning new infrastructure, we have basically automated workflows for a lot of other different pieces. So you can see the initial deployment stuff we've talked a little bit about, but we also have the lifecycle manager built in. We have scaling operations built in, and we have day 2 operations built in. Now, I'm not going to drain this slide obviously because we'd be here all day, and our goal is to talk about the the convert process. However, some of my favorite configurations are very much the password and certificate workflows. The update workflows. I mean, it allows us to very much, be in control of, how we upgrade and, how the upgrade will proceed with, the different components in, a very targeted and static way. So again, don't want to get too much into this. So for this webinar, as I said, we're going to be talking about the convert process. And so this process, is very much something where if you already are using Cloud Foundation, typically you're not going to use. But if you don't have VMware Cloud Foundation and you want to bring an environment into Cloud Foundation, that's where we're going to be able to showcase how that's done with the convert process. So let's quickly jump into some differences between converting and importing. I figure that's probably a good place to start. I mean, since we talked about the import, let's do that comparison of them. Now, before we jump into that, we want to pull up a poll just to see if you are familiar with that convert capability. So, Anders, if you can pull up that first poll, that'd be awesome. And you'll give it a couple of seconds just to to get some responses to that.
Got some serious participation going on here. Look at those numbers.
Well, I can't see them.
Oh, I'm watching them. I will share. I will share momentarily. This is well, for starters, we got 684 people in the audience today. So thanks to everybody for showing up. And we've got lots and lots of folks participating in the poll. So we're going to give this nearly 500 respondents right now. This is just amazing. Thanks, folks. Give this another 10 seconds and we'll end the poll. All righty, and 3, 2, 1, get in while you can. All right. Look at that.
Excellent.
So we got about a 20% yes ratio, which is pretty darn good.
Yeah, 80-20, that's pretty good for sure, yeah.
All right,
well, yeah, let's jump in and we'll talk through the actual process. So basically, when we talk about moving quote unquote vSphere instances into VMware Cloud Foundation, we have two basic methods. And I talked about the last one on our last webinar, and so that is the import process. And so that's where you have an existing vSphere environment, but you also have an existing VCF environment. And so what this allows you to do is take and import a vCenter server that's in the environment into your already existing Cloud Foundation environment. So you can take a look at that QR code there on on the slide. That is the previous session. You can take a look and you can see the differences there. And then the second column here is basically talking about the conversion. So this is where you don't have any SDDC Manager instance, so no VCF deployed already. And it allows you to basically take that and convert an existing vCenter environment into VMware Cloud Foundation using SDDC Manager. So that's that's something where like I said, it's a very powerful kind of tool, and it's something that I've been working with ever since it was released several 6-8 months ago to to really help people take advantage of VMware Cloud Foundation. So it all uses the same tool, and so that is a VCF import tool, and so it does both conversions and it does imports. And so again, it's something where depending on your starting state of the environment, you're going to have different level of pre-checks and a different level of details that's going to be required so that you can import some of the pieces. And so we're going to go through the details of what that actually looks like in some of the upcoming slides. So let's jump into our first step. And so the first thing that we need to do in any of these environments is we need to pre-check to make sure that we have addressed any of the prerequisites that we required to be able to use and import a vCenter server into VMware Cloud Foundation. And so there are many different things that that are required before you can do an actual import or convert process. And so in this case, let's jump into what that looks like. And so this is the pre-check command, and so this is done actually right on the vCenter server in the environment. And so the vCenter server, I've got two of them here in the screenshot. We're going to jump into the video of this here in the next slide. But essentially, you're going to run the brownfield py script. You're going to run the pre-check on the vCenter, and you're just going to give the username and password that's used. And so you can see a difference between each of the two different instances. And so I'm going to pull up the video here now. And so this video essentially shows the process that I went through to actually run this pre-check. And so in this particular instance, you can see this vCenter is on 803, and so this is the appropriate build. And then if I go over into this, you'll see that it's on 802 for my second vCenter server. And so this is something where we're going to show the the different pieces of both of these, and we'll show what that kind of looks like. Oh, restart the video there for a second. Oh, sorry. We'll restart this now. or maybe we won't. Doesn't want to let me. Give me a second, I'll jump back. Oh, geez. PowerPoint not being a friend today. All right, so here we go. Sorry about that. Essentially, like I said, we had two vCenters. One of them's 803, one of them's on 802, and we're going to need to basically run the pre-check on both of them. And so once we do that, I will show the difference in what those pieces look like. And so I have this side, which is essentially the vCenter vCenter 803, and you can see it passes. And the other side, you can see that it is the vCenter 802, which isn't the appropriate version, and you can see we see a bunch of different failures. And so in this particular case, we can see we have the vCenter bomb version, so obviously it's not on the appropriate version to be able to do the conversion. And then we see several other errors that need to be addressed before we're going to be able to successfully run a conversion process. Now, some of these things, they're not correctable, right? And so this is something where, for example, in the 5.2.1 version of VMware Cloud Foundation and the import capability, if you have NSXT integrated, that is something we can't currently import NSX. So that's one of the things, one of the gotchas that you'll be able to see, in this output. And that's something where in the future we expect that we'll be able to do the import for NSX. It's just not in this particular version. So that's something to to watch out for. But that is kind of what it looks like when we sort of start this pre-check process right on that vCenter server. And so let's jump into our next slide where we'll talk a little bit about, well, how do we fix that? And so obviously we have to upgrade VMware vSphere to the appropriate versions for the conversion process before we can actually run that conversion. And so some of you may have seen some of the different versions of this. However, we're going to start to talk through the two major components that we need to make sure we're on the appropriate version. So that is first off vCenter, and then we'll show the ESX process later. And so for the conversion, as I mentioned, in 5.2.1, it requires vCenter 8.0 U3C or later. And so there are several different ways that we can choose to upgrade. vCenter has over the years provided some great different workflows. And so in this particular case, I'm going to be showing the virtual management appliance or virtual appliance management interface way of upgrading because it's my favorite way. But none of the ways are better necessarily than one or the other. And so you can use the vCenter server installer, or you can use the reduced downtime upgrades function that's available in the later versions of vCenter. And you can also take a look at the KB article for the build number conversion from appliance to installer. So let's jump into the demo of what it looks like to do an upgrade process for vCenter. And so hopefully if you guys have used vSphere for any period of time, you should be aware of how the different vCenter pieces are upgraded. I showed how VCF is upgraded in the last video as well. And so to be comprehensive, we wanted to show each of the different pieces. So let's jump in. So we'll start off back on that pre-check slide basically, or the terminal session. And so this is where we see that we definitely need to do the upgrade of vCenter. And so once we have this process done, we will go and show that again with the appropriate thing. And so here's where the reduced downtime upgrade section is. It's right in vCenter, right in the client. I'm not gonna, like I said, run through this one. I'm gonna go right to the virtual appliance management interface and essentially run it right from here. And so you can log into the 5480 port, click the update tab, and what it'll do is it'll do a quick check for the different versions. Sometimes it can take a while. And we can see every single version that is applicable. And so you can see from 8.0.2, we have several different versions. So I'm going to sort by the version number. And I know that the version I need to be on for this particular convert process is the version 300 of the appliance. So I don't want to go to 400 just because it's outside the BOM. And so once I select that version, I can then click to actually update. And it'll run a bunch of pre-checks. And so these pre-checks are just to make sure the appliance is good to go. Typically before I do this process, I back up the vCenter appliance. These errors are nothing to worry about, so I can ignore them and continue. And then I will say, hey, I have backed up my appliance. And so you can see the time is about 53 minutes is what it predicted. The more data or the longer that the piece has been up, it's something that will take longer, obviously, to do that. And so I'll speed up this process because, again, it'll take about an hour sort of thing to happen. And so it goes through and it will apply the different updates, and it will do the conversion for each of the different pieces that we have available for for upgrade in in vCenter. And so once that completes, you'll see an installation completed, and you'll refresh the screen. And so once we refresh the screen, we will, I believe, need to relog back in because it reboots the appliance as a part of that. Yep. And so we will log in with our root username and password. And once we've done that, we can just verify the version. So I go back down to, I can see it here, but then I can go back down to my update, and you'll see that there is only one version that is that's available now. And this is that 400 version, which right now I'm not going to apply that update. So now if I go back over, I can log back into my vCenter server. And once I log back in here, we can see that vCenter VCO2 is now up and running the new version. And so we should be good to go to to run our our pre-check here again. And so you can see, we're on 803, the right version that we just applied. And we can then, like I said, go back over to our terminal session, and I will just rerun that one command here. And so that's the pre-check command that we had on the previous slide. And you can see once it does run, we can see that VC version compliance check is now something that has passed. So to be able to fully do this conversion process, I will need to fix the other one. So I'm going to do that offline in for this particular instance. However, that is the process that we use to be able to to validate and run through the different pieces of this. So that is the demo of how you can upgrade vCenter Server in this regards. And so again, vCenter Server is only one of the pieces. And so I'll jump to to my next slide, where we'll talk about upgrading the ESXi host, because the ESXi hosts also need to be on the appropriate bill of materials version for VMware Cloud Foundation. And so in this example, it is 5.2.1 or later. And so that allows us to use the typical ways of upgrading VC or ESXi to allow us to run the correct version. So in this case, I'm going to show just a vSphere lifecycle upgrade with using images. If you're using baselines, the process is slightly different, and then you can also use like the ISO file or the command line scripted process to be able to upgrade as well. And so ESXi upgrade, like I'm hoping that people have gone through some of that before, and it should be a pretty common process. However, like I said, I wanted to show it here just to be comprehensive about each of the components that we're doing and making sure that we're on the proper level. So jumping into the video for the ESXi side. So let's start off our video of this. And so you can see that we're on U3B here. And so in this case, I'm going to upgrade this particular cluster to U3C. And so we go in and we can edit the baseline that we have. We'll put the U3C build on. If you're using any vendor hardware, you can select your add-ons for firmware and vendor components, and then you can validate and save. I'm just going to save here because I'm not making any major changes, just the version. And so once that happens, it will do a compliance check on the particular cluster. And so you can see that we have 4 hosts that are now uncompliant. And I can just go in and click the remediate button and remediate these particular hosts. And so what's going to happen is, as a part of this process, it's going to do some HCL compatibility checks, and you're going to go in and you're going to start to see the actual process appear of remediating hosts. And so this takes, depending on the number of hosts and the amount of time that you're doing, it'll take 20 minutes per host typically. If you have a lot of migrations, it may take longer. So I've obviously sped this up so you can see the actual patch being applied, the reboots happen, and then you'll see final compliance check that will go in and make sure that each of the hosts are properly compliant with the image. And once that's done, that is our upgrade of ESXi host. So it seems pretty easy, but there can be many things that that need to be addressed as a part of some of these compliance checks to to make sure that you have the appropriate versions and of particular components and drivers, and then obviously the wait time whilst the host reboot and whatnot. So you may need I mean, if you're using vMotion that in the environment, you may not need a maintenance window, but depending on your company processes, a maintenance window may be required. So those are the 2 pieces I'm going to show for the preparing or the pre-checking and remediating the environment, making sure we're good to go for the actual upgrade to VMware Cloud Foundation using the conversion process. And so let's go into our next step. So our next step is that we have to go in and we have to prepare our environment to be ready to go for the actual your remainder of the steps. So the first piece that we need to do is we need to go and we need to download all of the the pieces that we need. And so you can see that on the slide we have our SDDC Manager appliance. So that's one thing we're going to need, because if we don't already have one, we're going to be deploying that as a part of our workflow for conversion. This is also where you can download the import tool, which I've already done, and I had it pre-deployed on those vCenter servers. So we will need to take that import tool and we'll need to apply it to our to our SDDC Manager as well as our vCenter servers to run the compliance checks. And you'll also need to download the appropriate NSX bundle, because NSX is a required component in 5.2.1. And so although we don't support importing in the existing environment, we support deploying a brand new instance that will be attached so that we can properly align to how VMware Cloud Foundation does a lot of the the networking and other components. So that's the first part of the preparation. Again, we talked a little bit about NSX, but before we can actually run the conversion process, we have to make sure we fill out our NSX JSON file as well. So this is basically the pieces for the license keys. It's the pieces for the bundle that we're using, depending on the version of VMware Cloud Foundation, as well as the IP address, DNS, gateway, subnet information for each of the nodes that will be used in the NSX management cluster. So this is preparing the environment. It's not basically turning on all the the goodness of NSX, but it is something that that we need to have that verified and available as well. So those are the two basic preparation pieces that we need to do. And so once we have that done, we can now start our conversion process. And so the first part of starting the conversion process is we need to make sure we have the SDDC Manager appliance that's used for VMware Cloud Foundation. It has to be available to be able to run the actual convert. And so SDDC Manager, as I mentioned, is that sort of control plane for VMware Cloud Foundation that allows you to go in and commission more hosts. It allows you to create workload domains, as well as the all the different pieces of password management, certificates, deploying the vRealize components into the integrated mode, that sort of thing. So it is sort of that life cycle engine for VMware Cloud Foundation, and sort of management interface for the different pieces that we're going to be deploying. So let's take a look, jump right into that deployment process. And so if you guys have ever used the OVA deploy before, this is kind of what we're doing. So we're going to go in and we're going to basically take our downloaded image. We're going to upload it as the image we're using. And so I'll go in and I'll find my my drive where I've downloaded that to. And so we're going to take that over and we'll basically start our process of doing the import. And so we're just going to give it a friendly name. So that way, we know that this is going to be our newly deployed SDDC Manager. We're going to go in and we're going to then select, hey, well, where are we going to deploy it? And so we'll select the resource. In this case, I'll just leave it at my cluster so it gets deployed to a proper host. You can then go in and you'll fill out the rest of the template details. And so in this case, first we're going to accept the EULA. We're going to pick our storage. And so in this case, I'm using vSAN storage. So I will click next to that. I will then make sure I have it on the appropriate network. And so I can go in and I can browse for the networks on my particular host. And you'll just make sure that I have it on the appropriate, in this case, the VM network, for the ability to deploy to the proper network. And then I'm going to have to go in and I'm going to have to specify a whole bunch of different passwords for the different user accounts that are in VCF. And so I'll speed through that process of just entering all the different usernames. I can then give it a host name, IP address, and network information as well. And so basically that's typical for a template to basically get all the the details. And once we're done, we can click finish, and we'll see that process actually go through and import for the SDDC Manager appliance. So this will take depending on the the amount of storage free space as well as the speed of the storage, it could take a few minutes to actually do this. And once it is deployed, we will be ready to to power it on, and we'll wait for it to be available for that conversion process to start. And so let's go in and do that now. We'll go in and I'm going to power on this SDDC Manager appliance. And so this can take 5 to 10 minutes to get fully up and running, because it's got to do a bunch of the prerequisite configurations and checks. And so if we hit that launch web console here, once we see it powering on, you'll see the actual screen of what we'll see. And then what we're going to do is we're going to open up a web browser here in a second, and you will see what the actual interface looks like when we're ready to go for a convert process. And so this is typical of what you'll see when VMware Cloud Foundation powers on. And so if I go in here, you'll see VMware Cloud Foundation is initializing. Well, once it's ready to start a convert process, you'll see this message pop up right in the screen, where it basically says, hey, I don't have a configuration. Let's start the conversion, basically. And so again, if we have done this greenfield, I mean, you'll never see the screen. But in this particular case, because we're doing it for brownfield and for that convert process, we want to make sure it's ready to go and it's on this particular screen before we proceed further. So that is the process of getting SDDC Manager up and ready. And so once you see this message, you can log in via SSH, and you can go in and deploy the tooling that we need for our next step. And so our next step is that convert process. And so there's a bunch of different pieces here. I've got a couple of different videos and a couple of polls in this section that we can kind of talk through some of those pieces. So let's talk a little bit more about the requirements for conversion, because I mean there is a whole bunch of different requirements for the conversion process. And so the first one we kind of already addressed. We made sure that everything aligns with the appropriate bill of materials for VCF 5.2. We have to make sure that your SDDC Manager is deployed, and so we just did that. And then we have a bunch of other more minor things, such as where does vCenter reside? It has to be co-located with the cluster that we're converting in. We have to make sure that our storage is appropriate. We have to make sure that our VM kernel adapters are appropriately set. And so this is something where there are quite a few more prerequisites, but this is where our guidance and the tooling come into play. And so that is basically if you go to our documentation page, we can see the whole slew of different things that need to have be checked and be modified. And so that's, again, like I said, where that tool comes in, where we're going to do a check on this in just a second here, and it'll run through about 100 different checks to make sure that we have the different pieces configured in the way that VMware Cloud Foundation needs to be able to do the import process. And so this is where I'll show a couple of remediation pieces in here as well, because all the issues must be remediated before we can kick off that conversion process. It's something where, depending on the version, you'll see the different checks maybe up and down. I think on our last one we had 103. So we've modified some of the things in this particular release of the tooling. So let's jump into that video. And so we're going to start back off right at the the interface where we left on the last video. And so we're going to go in and we're going to take that and we're going to just simply run the check from the SDDC Manager this time instead of from vCenter. And so this is the check command. And so once we run that, we'll have to enter a couple of passwords. And so these passwords essentially are for both SDDC Manager and the vCenter server. And you can see it's going to go through and run the guardrails checks. And so it'll take a little bit of time here, usually about a minute. And you'll see we get some outputs as to the stuff that's failed. And so what I'll do is I'm going to open the the output YAML file here, and we're going to see which stuff failed in this particular environment. And so two of the ones that we have here on the screen are the DVS version. And so this is not the right version. We need to make sure it's upgraded. And then also we have to make sure that our upgrade settings for for this are set appropriately as well. And so I'm going to go into my vCenter server here. You can see my newly deployed appliance, and I'm just going to go and I'm going to do these two remediation processes. So I'm going to first upgrade our switch, and so we can see we're on 6.6, and so we're going to just basically do the upgrade here. Keep in mind that a lot of the times you might need a maintenance window to do some of these things, obviously, but it is something that many of these things there's documented processes right within the right within the guides and right within that YAML file. And so that's the first one. We're going to go over to our lifecycle section, hit the settings button, and we're going to go into our images section. and we're going to have to make sure our imaging section is set up appropriate. So there is part of the documentation, we have the settings that are needed. In this case, the only one we need to set is this migrate powered off and suspended virtual machines setting. And so once we do that, those I think are the two things we need to remediate in this particular instance. And so we're going to go back over into your inventory here, and we can flick back over to our SDDC Manager VM. And so we can then take and run that particular command again, where we'll go in and just run it again. We'll make sure that we are good to go for our conversion process. And so you'll see the same command run again, and you can see in this case we have 100 successful checks instead of 98. And so in this case, if we looked at the failed log, we won't see anything anymore. However, that is because we fixed the issues that it was seeing. And so, again, there are 100 different things that could potentially, be on that list. And there is a, process, in the YAML file and the CSVs for you to know exactly which stuff you need to fix before you'll be able to do that conversion. So that is our pre-check, detailed pre-check option, once we have SDDC Manager up and running. And we then can fix any of those problems so that we can begin the conversion process. So let's talk a bit about the conversion process now. And so the conversion process uses the same script, the VCF brownfield PY, but it uses the convert command this time. And so if you joined on our last session, it was using the import. And so you can see the difference in the command there is just one piece. And so we then also have to specify the domain name and NSX deployment path, as well as the credentials. The NSX deployment spec, that is the file that we had created in our last step. And so we need to make sure that is available on the vCenter server on the SDDC Manager, I should say, as well. Now for the NSX configuration validation, that happens as a part of the conversion and import processes. And so in this particular case, you can see on the screenshot, or maybe you can't, it might be a little bit small, that the path, so the binary is not available in the appropriate location. And so therefore, to fix that, we just need to go in and upload the binary appropriately. And so we'll show that as a part of our convert demo here in just a second. And also, it's one of those things where it'll check other things such as the DNS and IP configurations and whatnot. Now, before we jump into the demo, let's jump into our next poll. And so, Anders, if we can pull up the second poll, do you guys think that you'll leverage the convert capability in the next 12 months? That is what we kind of want to know. So let's give a few seconds for that poll.
All righty. Rocking and rolling here.
And Jonathan, while we're waiting for that poll, maybe we can answer a couple of the live questions that came up and then jump back into the session. During this conversion, will the vCenter still be available, or does this require a full disruption?
The vCenter stays available. It's only adding it to the to the interface for SDDC Manager. Okay.
Another one, is there downtime converting to cloud foundation? Same question. So I think that's
so. There's no downtime required for any of the VMs. It's a seamless process where it imports the vCenter server and deploys NSX.
And Anders, let us know when you want us to move forward. But one more question at least.
Sure.
Is a SDDC greenfield deployment with FC block storage without vSAN possible? With fiber channel block storage without vSAN possible? Let's say yes, but
So greenfield, no. Greenfield needs to use vSAN FC would need to be done in a workload domain. So the greenfield deployment, the management domain, will only support vSAN, but anything else does support other storages.
Right.
All righty, and we're all set with our poll here. Looks like the yeses barely hedged out the no's, and we've got a nice cross-population of considering it's.
Awesome, excellent.
Fantastic.
All right, well, yeah, let's jump into the demo of the actual convert process now. So the convert process, again, it runs that command that we showed on our previous slide, and so you can see that we have the convert command put in there. So I will run that. You'll enter the passwords for SDDC Manager and vCenter. And once we're done that, you can see that in this case, I left the error message in. And so we're going to have to go in and move our binary file, and so that bundle file, into the appropriate location so that we have the NSX pieces available for the actual conversion process once it starts. And so we will do that. And so once that bundle is available, I'm going to go in and I'm going to rerun that command. And so that command basically, again, is the convert option. You have to enter the passwords again here, and you'll see the actual conversion process start. And so during this conversion process, because SDDC Manager is waiting for a configuration, we won't be able to go in like we did in the import session and and watch that process, right? So in this particular case, we have to just specify yes to a couple of prompts here for the different keys of all the hosts and SDDC Manager, and it's going to run through all of that configuration, including that pre-check again. And so you can see the process go forward. And once it does that, it's going to go in and create the vCenter images or instance in SDDC Manager. And so you can see it'll take some time here, and then it's going to start the actual deployment of NSX as well. And so the pieces are happening now. So it's now deploying NSX. Again, this is a several-hour process, but what I've done is I've went in and sped up the actual video. And so you're going to have to watch for yes prompts as they come up. Sometimes it can take a little bit of time here or there to run through those prompts. But yeah, we'll get through and it will go in and run the pieces. So you can go over to the vSphere client here, and so I just switched over, and you can see the actual process of deploying the the NSX templates. Once those are done, you'll see them power on as well. So that all happens right from the interface. And so that is probably the only thing you can do until we actually have this completely deployed and running. Because basically the last step of a convert process is to restart the services on this particular virtual machine. And then you'll see that error message that we have when we go to SDDC Manager, be resolved. You'll see the initialize, and you'll see, we can see our environment at that point. So if you take a look, you can see, it's got a couple of warnings in here, and you can see that we did also successfully, complete the actual import process and the creation of NSX, right in the messages once the script completes. And so we're hoping that this will, this will look a little bit different in the future, but never know. We'll see how it goes. And so this is the command that you have to run to just restart the services of your VCF. And so that'll take a couple of minutes for that. And so once we do that, we'll be able to go in and log back into our SDDC Manager interface. And so that is something that, as a part of the restart services, it'll generally log you out. But once that happens, you can see now we're right at that initialization pane, and it's recognized the configuration, and you can see SDDC Manager is up and running, using the management domain that we just converted in our in our demo. And so you can see all the different things that were done. And so there is obviously quite a different number of things that it makes sure are correct, including the deployment of NSX. And yeah, we can go in and check out our workload domains. And so if we go into our management domain here, you can see the one that we just imported. And you can see all the different services are up and running appropriately based off of what we had. And then also you can see that we now can go and apply the different configuration updates. And so you can see we have a couple of configuration updates, as well as we can plan patching. And so now that you're on the vCenter, or sorry, on the VCF configuration, and your vCenter is imported, we can now patch. And so in the 5.2 release, we have the ability not only to upgrade to the BOM components, we have the plan patching button, which you can go in and you can basically upgrade, for example, vCenter or the ESX host based off of the different versions that are available. So that's where if you have that's basically where if you have a patch that gets released or something like that needs to be applied because it's critical, you can out of band upgrade that right from the interface now with VMware Cloud Foundation. And so now for this particular environment, we can also run through the password and certificate workflows as well, and we can also deploy the ARIA suite products right from here to attach into this particular vCenter environment. or converted environment, right? So now it's VCF. So that is our conversion process. So a little bit quick because we skipped a lot of the the middle time, obviously, but that is what a convert process looks like. In addition to what we presented last time with our import process. And so this is where VMware Professional Services can be very useful in in helping with both the conversion process, but also any of the remediation or upgrades. We have a wealth of experience in doing all of these functions. So hoping that that if you do need some assistance, that you can take advantage of that. And so with that, let's move on to our final poll. And so this poll is, would you be interested in leveraging VCF Professional Services to help convert your environment? And so that's something where we just want to get a little bit of detail on that. And so we'll let that poll go for a bit.
And we are rolling. Again, thanks to everybody for participating. It's sometimes we have to like poke people and be like, hey, the poll's up. And I'm watching these numbers spin like a gas pump here. This is fantastic.
Hopefully they're not that expensive, though.
No, definitely not. In fact, the savings is all to you. All right, let this. Some no's and some considering it's.
Excellent.
There's our result. All righty.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's it was good to know some of those details here. And so yeah, again, hopefully that gives you guys and gals a good understanding of sort of what the process would look like for the convert piece. And so that is our session today. And so let's jump right in, and I'll pass it to you, Cecilio. Let's jump into some Q&A before we wrap it up.
Yeah, before we get started, just a reminder to everyone out there, there is a new resources tab at the bottom of your screen, of your Zoom screen, which you can click and find more resources or access and get to the links and so on. Yep. So please definitely.
I'll pull this up as well. I'll pull this up, Cecilio, as well while we do our questions, so that way that one's running, and then we can pass to Anders after.
Yep, sounds good. So the next question is, I've seen a KB article that made mention of an issue if your existing vSphere clusters are using image-based update manager. Can you address this?
I'm not aware of any issues with the image base. I frequently use images in my builds. I've never seen an issue, but I can't answer that one. Cecilio, sorry.
No problem. The next one is, once we start the import convert process, either one, is there a rollback process in place? Can we go back to the original state of the VMware infrastructure, versioning and certificate involved?
So there is no rollback process. So that's why we recommend performing the backups and that sort of thing of the environment before you start.
Which was a statement that someone shared earlier, and that is in our tech documents, that recommendation as well. So thank you for the person who did mention that. The next one is, will the conversion just for host running GA release ESXi, or would it also include integrated vendor HCI hosts such as VxRail, Scale.io, vBlock, etc.?
So as far as I'm aware, there isn't a process for VxRail yet for the import convert. But for any of the non VxRail stuff, it is available. It can be used.
Right. And the next one, the conversion works with vCenter HA.
vCenter HA has to be disabled before you can do the convert. It can then be re-enabled after the conversion process.
Okay. Is it possible to convert a vSphere environment using the Convert VCF tool and have both the management domain and the workload domain in the same cluster? I mean, a consolidated scenario where management VMs and workload VMs reside together in the same cluster, since my customer only has one vCenter with one cluster.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you only have one vCenter, one cluster, it will import all the clusters in that particular vCenter into that. They won't be separate workload domains. It'll be consolidated configuration because we've not imported any other workload domains. But as long as it's a single vCenter, both clusters will be imported.
Great. Import or convert NSX not supported. Is that right?
Correct. At this time, in the 5.2.1 release, there is no support for importing an existing NSX instance. In the future, that will be available, though.
Yes, you should see something, but that is for product management to share with you.
Yep.
When importing an existing environment, does it create a new workload domain and does it join the existing SDDC SSO domain? Or can you import a cluster into an existing workload domain? In this case, what happens to the vCenter?
So you can't import a cluster from a virtual center. The import process, you will import the vCenter and all of its clusters into the existing SDDC Manager. And so after that, if you have a secondary vCenter server, you could import that. And so it wouldn't be a conversion, it'd be an import, and that would be a workload domain. So the convert process creates that initial management domain cluster. Anything else, anything you import will convert into or will be imported into a workload domain.
And that's the difference between convert and import. Convert is where you don't have a VCF
Yep.
instance to move into or don't want to use whatever VCF instance you have, where import is importing you into a current VCF instance.
Exactly. So it'd be two commands to do two different virtual centers, one to create the management and then one to do the convert. Yep.
Is there a way to keep the ESXi host management networks on a vSwitch when compared to distributed switch when moving to VCF, as we want to keep the host management network on vSwitch when compared to DVS? Is this supported in the upcoming VCF 9, or is there an option to ignore VCF trying to move from vSwitch to DVS only for the management network?
Yeah, so for the 5.2 release, it does require DVS to be used. I can't really speak to the 9, the 9 interface yet, and we don't have details on that yet.
Right. Can you also do quick boot option from single image?
So yeah, the VCF conversion process. I mean, it doesn't use those pieces, but yeah, if you are upgrading your ESX or your vCenter servers, you can use quick boot for that. And so that's both within and without SDDC Manager. Right? So with SDDC Manager, when you do an upgrade process from within SDDC Manager, you have the option to turn quick boot on if you want to for that workflow. But yeah, before you actually get SDDC Manager involved, yeah, you can use quick boot to do the upgrade of your hosts from vCenter.
Okay. Are checksums run to validate the update image?
Yep, they are.
How do you do 3 vCenters in link mode?
So you have to break the link mode ring before you actually can do the import and conversion processes. So you would go in, you'd have to break that ring. You pick one of the 3 vCenters to be your management domain, and you do the convert process on that. And then you would take each of the other virtual center servers, they're now in their own link mode ring, and you would import, run 2 import processes to import the other 2 as workload domains.
Great. Is VCF 5.2.1, you mentioned NSX is mandatory, and VCF 9 is also present that requirement, or it can be done without NSX only vCenter?
It is a requirement from 5.2 onwards, from my understanding.
Yes.
So NSX is one of those things that's being more and more built in to the platform. So it's definitely something that is a requirement.
Right. And again, VCF 9 not released yet, obviously, and some of this would be dependent on any changes or adjustments. So we can't guarantee anything. That would have to do our product management team.
Yep.
Are 4 hosts now the minimum for a edge cluster? Can a very small site, less than 15 VMs, on a 3-node cluster?
So depending on your storage type, there is less requirements for for workload domains. So if you're using vSAN, it's a minimum of 3. If you're using FC or NFS, I believe you can do 2 for an edge cluster now.
Okay. My customer already got ARIA Suite Enterprise deployed. Will they still need to redeploy ARIA Lifecycle from SDDC in VCF 9? As I understand, that's at least a requirement in VCF 5.2 to get the VCF bits.
So I can't really speak to the 9 stuff yet. Hopefully, we'll have more information, once that is released. If you are wanting to have integrated, ARIA in 5.2, however, yeah, you would need to basically there's I believe a command that you can run to convert an existing instance into a managed one. That being said, is that there's no requirement to have or use integrated ARIA with VCF 5.2. Because all of the lifecycle management and those functions are all done right from the ARIA components as they stand. So if you are converting an environment that does have ARIA involved, you can basically use your existing environment without any issues. The main difference between the integrated one and the not integrated one is that we use very specific configurations for the overlay networks that the ARIA uses. So that follows the VMware validated design guidance for those pieces. So that's something where it's kind of dependent on situation, but that's in general what the guidance is.
Yeah, and again, just on 9, and maybe Anders or Simon can comment here, but I'm sure there's a plan to have a session specific to 9 and what's coming and what the differences are. So be on the lookout for that, and that's where a lot of the 9 questions and updates will be presented.
Yep. And do you have time for a couple more, or do we want to pass it to Anders?
Yeah, Anders, what do you want? Do we want to answer 2 or 3 more, or?
Yeah, I think we can do 2 more. Just leave me a minute at the end because I've got some cool resources to share with everybody. And yeah, we can probably squeeze in 2 more questions.
Yep.
Perfect.
Nowadays, the identity source might be critical to the conversion process moving off internal LDAP. Is there any way to include the identity provider deployment, Okta AD, Azure, and so on, in the process, or any authentication improvement should be performed after the fact?
Is an after or before the fact thing. It's not going to be part of our conversion process. However, yeah, at any point you could convert the providers appropriately. We're just going to be importing vCenter into SDDC Manager as a part of at least the conversion and import process, right? So those configurations are secondary to the actual convert process.
Okay, and last one, is it planned to convert without vSAN, for example, normal SAN?
I believe that we do support certain variants of other things that aren't vSAN. Don't have all the details on that yet.
Okay. And Anders, over to you.
All righty, all set.
Perfect.
And
All right, I will.
got something to share here.
I will stop that share.
Not a problem. Thank you. All righty, and just as a reminder for next steps, find your local VMUG community. For those of you who aren't already, you definitely want to check out the VMware user groups at vmug.com. Other things you can do is try a hands-on lab. Hands-on labs are a great opportunity for you to try various incarnations of VMware products and services in a virtualized environment. It's really the best possible way to get in and try to do things in real time. I mean, they're just fantastic. And of course, any of you who have been to our hands-on lab sessions at Explore know this, but we have a full library online available with new ones being added all the time. Speaking of Explore, attend VMware Explore. Once again, we're going to be in Las Vegas this year. We will not be in Barcelona because we're actually going to be doing a Explore Roadshow in other geolocations. And Las Vegas is going to be August 25th through 28th this year, similar time as last year. And call for papers is open. If you'd like to present, you can actually go to the Explore webpage and submit a presentation to be reviewed. And with that, thanks to everybody. We've got the VCF webinar schedule and on demand at the broadcom.tech/VCF-webinars. And that's where we not only advertise all of our sessions that are coming up, but also have our recordings stored for anybody who might have missed some, or if sessions like today where we're absolutely on fire and you want to share with your colleagues, please do. So with that, I think that's all we have today. So thank you everybody for joining. It's always good to see so many people in the audience. We might have broken a record today. I'm not sure. We're going to have to check with Simon on that one. But Jonathan, Cecilio, and all of our Q&A helpers, thanks again for everything today.
Yeah, thank you, Anders. Thank you, everybody. Glad to present.
Awesome. Thanks for coming back. Take care.